Good morning, everybody. This is Thomas Felder, and we're here for another edition of Wellness Wednesday. And today we're going to be in for a real treat, a real surprise. Brother Paul is going to be leading out for us today. Dr. Ted is not available, but we are so grateful to have each of you on with us. And we just pray for God's mercy and his blessing as we go forward today. Good morning, everybody. This is Thomas Felder, and we're here. All right. Without any further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Brother Paul. Brother Paul.
Thank you, my brother. I appreciate that. Elder Thomas, in these last days, we need to make sure we have the natural remedies of life. And there's a young lady that you and I enjoy. Her name is Sister Barbara O'Neill. And she does a wonderful workshop on natural remedies. And since she has the pedigree of Dr. Ted, I thought it would be a wonderful way for us to share on today. So I'm going to share my screen. And of course, if you'd like to get a copy of this, you can request that. We'll put that in the chat as well. Without further ado, here's Sister Barbara O'Neill at a health camp talk on June. It was back on, I think it was June 2nd of 2018. Be blessed.
I think it's a good idea on Sabbath afternoon to have a light meeting. And what I'd like to do in this meeting, I've been asked to share some of the stories of people who've been healed from implementing the natural remedies. And I'd like to begin with a story of a lady who was in her mid-50s and she was about to go on dialysis. And she knew that her kidneys weren't working well because her legs had swollen. So what I want to do is I want to show you why that happens when someone's kidneys aren't working well. Your kidneys are made up of little nephrons. These are the little filtering units. It's where the blood's filtered. And the filtrate comes down through these tubules and then into the bladder. You see, God designed the kidneys to filter the blood. So here's your bladder. And what happens is the blood comes into these little filtering units, it gets filtered, and then the blood weaves around the filtering units. And in your kidney, so the kidney looks like this, and all these little filtering units are all on the edge like that, and these tubules weave down basically like that. And then into the ureter, there's the other ureter, and there's the bladder. Now in a 24-hour period, those filtering units filter 1,800 litres of blood. We don't have that much blood. That's because every 2 minutes, 1.2 litres is being filtered. Now, out of that 1,800 litres of blood, 180 litres of filtrate is filtered out. Sorry, filtrate. A filtrate is what's filtered out. But we only urinate out 1.5 litres in a day. So there's a reabsorption here. And in that reabsorption here, pH is being monitored. In that reabsorption, sodium levels are being balanced. In that reabsorption there, water levels are being balanced. And in that reabsorption there, blood pressure is being balanced. So your kidneys not only filter the blood, they also play an important role in keeping balance in the body. So when this lady, her legs began to swell, that was an indication that the kidneys aren't working well. Her blood pressure was also going up, another indication her kidneys aren't working well. And the night before she was to come to our health retreat, she rang up and she said, "I'm very worried about coming to your health retreat." I said, "Oh?" She said, "Well, what if I go through the detox and I get even worse? She said, have you got a doctor there? I said, no, we don't have a doctor. In fact, we don't want a doctor. And I didn't say that to her. She said, well, how far are you from the hospital? I said, we're an hour from the hospital, but I said, we'll keep an eye on you. We can adjust our program. We'll keep you closely monitored. All right, she said. Her mother and her sister had pressured her to come. Early that morning, and every morning I pray for every guest. I pray for wisdom, because God knows what I don't know. He knows in the ins and outs. What does the Bible says? He knows how many hairs are on our head. Now, I had many babies, and I used to watch my baby. I knew them intricately, but I did not know how many hairs are on their head. So I was praying that morning. I said, Father in heaven, what do I do for the kidneys? Now, I only usually keep the dried herbs that we're going to be using a lot. And we don't get a lot of people with kidney problems. And God said, put into my mind, my celery was going to seed. Celery is a very good kidney herb. And in the seed, you've got a concentration of the active ingredients of the plant. And parsley was going to seed. Parsley is another very good kidney herb. And in the seed, again, you've got a concentration of your active ingredients that help the kidney. And couch grass, C-O-U-C-H, couch grass. Couch grass is growing everywhere. In fact, I'm continually pulling it out of my garden. And it is a kidney herb. I said, thank you, Father in heaven. So before I went to work, I picked a whole lot of the seed heads of the parsley and the celery. I gladly pulled out a heap of couch grass, sort of a long thready grass. In fact, it's on the lawn here. It makes a beautiful lawn. As I was walking barefoot over, makes a lovely soft lawn. And to make it palatable, I put some fresh ginger in it. And my plan was for her to drink 1 litre of this a day. As I'm consulting with her, I discover that she's only drinking 2 glasses of water a day, and she's having 3 cups of coffee a day. So she's very dehydrated. That puts a load on the kidneys. I also discovered she had all the symptoms of a gluten intolerance. She could not handle wheat. I also discovered that she had a major hormonal imbalance. And I like to use the process of elimination and eliminate anything that could be contributing to the problem. On the first day, she didn't go on the exercise program because her legs were still swollen. So I suggested that she rebound for 1 minute every hour while she's at our retreat, because we have a rebounder on our veranda, and over in another area where the gym is, we have another rebounder. So she just did a little bit of rebounding. By the end of the first day, her legs were going back to normal. So on the second day, she walked with the guests. Now, another thing I did encourage her to do, I said, you must never drink a whole glass of water at once. That puts a big strain on kidneys that are already compromised. I said, I want you to drink 1/3 of a glass at a time. Now, she was on no salt because she was told salt was bad. Because she was not used to salt, I said, I just want you to have the smallest little crystal. So she spaced out her water, and she was drinking her tea, and she spaced that out too. By the end of the week, she was a very happy lady. Her legs were gone back to normal. Her blood pressure was coming down a little bit. That doesn't come down quickly. She went home very excited. I'd made a plan for her to continue when she went home. I even went to my garden, picked a whole lot of the seeds, but I said, you can order these from a health food shop. She emailed me 3 months later. She said, astonishing news. She said, I don't have to go on dialysis. She said, my kidney function has come back to normal. She said, my liver markers, she had a test for, she said, they've always been inflamed. She said, they're back to normal. She said, my inflammatory markers are all back to normal. She said, I'm actually going from part-time work back to full-time work. Now, this was a registered nurse. You see, doctors and nurses don't learn how to apply all the knowledge they learn to the health of the body because they don't study nutrition. She was a very excited lady, and she said, I'm not depressed like I was. The yam cream had helped her there. And she said, I have lost 10 kilos in weight. Now that was over 3 months. She was a very happy lady. How simple. You see, the human body is an amazing piece of machinery with an inbuilt ability to heal itself when you give it the right conditions. A few months later, we had a man come to our program and he said, look, my doctor's not happy about me being here. He wants me to go on dialysis straight away, but I thought I'd give the retreat a try first. Well, we did the same thing. And he emailed me a couple of months later with the same result. He said, fantastic news, I don't need to go on dialysis. So that's good news for people with kidney problems. I'd like to also share with you a story about a man who did our program, and this man had prostate cancer and he was 56. He was not really interested in doing our program, but his wife, who was 55, and his daughter, who was 30, were very keen. So when they sat in front of me, I said to him, well, we can do this, this and this. And he went, oh, I suppose so. And his wife and his daughter said, yes, yes. Now, what we do to help conquer cancer is we stop all fruit, because cancer cells consume 15 times the glucose of any other cell. We also give green drinks, and at Misty Mountain we gather wild greens, we blend them with water and we strain them. So it's like drinking grass. So they drink a litre of that over the day. We also wrap our people that come wanting help with cancer up in sodium bicarbonate wraps. Now this is 2 kilos of sodium bicarbonate, and this is 5 litres of hot water, and we dip the towels in that hot water, wring it, and then we wrap the torso and then cover it. Then we wrap one leg and cover that. Then wrap the other leg, then the other arm, and then we wrap a big blanket around and a shower curtain, and we keep them wrapped up for 1 hour. You see, cancer loves an acid environment, and sodium bicarbonate is the ultimate alkalizer. And so what this does is alkalize the tissues from the outside, the green drinks from the inside. We're also put them on herbs to help. So you can see we're coming at from a few different angles. He wasn't that interested, but his wife and his daughter were. They kept pushing it. Well, he was with us for 2 weeks. So, you know, he had quite a few treatments in that 2 weeks. And then when he was about to go home, I said, well, make sure you have the green drinks every day. And he said, oh, I suppose so. And his wife and daughter said, yes, he'll do it, he'll do it. They were so keen, they were so keen. And he was, I suppose so. We also, his yam cream, because it was prostate, also sulpimento, which is a specific for prostate, zinc. So there are a few fine tunings depending on the situation. And home they went. We didn't hear anything for 3 months. And then the man emailed me. He said, I have just had a test from the doctor and they can find no cancer. He's keen. He's very keen now. And I thought it was an interesting story because it is important to believe in what you're doing. It is important to believe that what you're doing is having an effect. And he was sort of neither here nor there. But I think the enthusiasm and the faith of his daughter and his wife were sort of carrying him along. He owns a big strawberry farm. He just had to look at the strawberries for a while. We usually advise that the person who's conquering cancer just have no fruit for 6 weeks and very little carbohydrate. And then little by little, the other can be eased in. I think the programs you'll find on the internet, plus in my book, Self-Heal by Design, I have defined the programs in there. If you've been unable to buy it, you can go to Amazon and it is on Kindle. You can get an ebook on it. But my aim was to write a book that covered these principles and contained the basic programs to help to heal it. But probably that's quite a remarkable story, but one of the most remarkable is the story of Elizabeth Cott. Elizabeth Cott was a woman in her early 60s, and she had a bit of pain, so she went to the doctor and she had 3 large tumours in her abdomen. And the doctor said, "You have to begin chemotherapy immediately. This is aggressive cancer." She didn't like the thought of chemotherapy. The side effects are fairly horrific. You know, your hair falls out, you get diarrhea, your digestion's hardly ever the same again. Many people, they lose the feelings in their extremities, and you know, the current figures on the success rate aren't very good. So a friend of hers, as she was thinking about what to do, a friend of hers gave her one of my DVDs on conquering cancer. So she rang up and booked into Misty Mountain Health Retreat. She was there for 2 weeks, and as she's listening to the lectures, she went, "Oh dear." I said, "What's the matter?" She said, "I think I know what's been causing and feeding my cancer." She said, "I'm the pavlova maker at the Polish church." She was a Polish lady, and the Polish love their desserts. So I have to take the microphone away for a moment to show you the size of the pavlovas she made. And she said in a pavlova that size, 16 cups of white sugar. Whew. She said, "Isn't this true? In ignorance." She said, "In ignorance, I've been feeding my cancer." She was a 7-day Adventist. She was a vegetarian. She was on a lot of medication for blood pressure, heart disease, she was pre-diabetic. Well, Elizabeth implemented everything that we taught her. And she went back to the doctor 3 months later. He did the test. They do cancer marker tests, a few things. He said, "Come back and see me in 6 months." Now, what did he say to her on the first visit? "You're going to have chemo immediately. This is aggressive." Well, why didn't he pursue it a little bit further? Do you know, it's very hard when you're a doctor, that's 7 years, specialist, that's a couple more years, to suddenly realise that you're actually doing the wrong thing. Meaning, you see, it's not healing people. All medicine has got with cancer is cut, poison and burn. I mean, surgery and chemotherapy and radiotherapy. I've had people come to me with breast cancer and the radiotherapy has burnt holes in their lungs. I've had people come to me that have had uterine surgery and cancer, and the radiotherapy has burnt holes in their colon. It's very, very hard just to get that little spot. And when you consider that the human body was designed to heal itself, what we need to know is how it heals, how it works, and then work with that process. That's why we need to put our detective hat on and look at all the things that could be contributing. And there can be many, and the stories I tell you are an indication of the many triggers, on the many factors. Elizabeth, a year later, had a scan and one of the tumours was totally gone. She said to me, "The doctors cannot understand what's happening to me." She said, "The fact is, I'm off all my medication." She said, "I've lost weight. I'm wearing suits that I wore when I was 40. And she said, "And I have to tell you, I feel better now than I felt in my 40s. She had another scan, I think it was 8 months later, and the second tumour has gone. Totally gone. In fact, there's a little magazine, it's a 7-day Adventist magazine in Australia called Signs of the Times. And they heard about the story and they actually published a little story on Elizabeth. It's 5 years later now, and Elizabeth goes to the doctor every year to get an assessment. And they said, there is a tumour still there, but it's not doing anything. So we're not really concerned about it. And when she goes to the doctor, the oncologist is there, the specialist there, her doctor's there, and they're all just looking at her. They can't understand what is happening with this woman. Elizabeth now gives lectures, she gives talks, she gives cooking classes. She is a living testimony of the power of natural remedies. In James chapter 5, it says, the prayer of faith shall save the sick and the Lord shall raise him up. And if you look at Ellen White's comment, she said, it is not enough to pray. She said, when we pray, God will direct our minds to some simple natural treatments that can be done to help with the healing of the body. I have another story about a man named Tom. Now, this man was 78 and he had a tumour on his liver, and the doctor said, you've got to have chemo immediately, and he decided not to, so he came to our retreat. Now, he was a vegetarian, but he loved peanut butter, he loved sugar biscuits, he loved white bread. So when he heard the lectures, he started to realise he was doing a lot of things that were feeding the cancer. So he began to implement the lifestyle. He stayed with us for 2 weeks. He went home and his wife was very diligent at helping him in this area. And he rang me 4 months later. He said, I've just had a scan and the tumour on my liver has gone. He said, the doctor said it must have been a cyst. But he said, on the initial scan, they said, you've got a tumour and you've also got some cysts. In other words, there was a big difference between the tumour and the cysts. And sometimes it's hard for medicine. When they sometimes think, well, was it really there? He said, you know, a few other things are happening. He said, I used to crawl out of bed in the morning. He said, I leap out of bed now. He said, I had a lump on my sternum. He said, it's gone. He said, I had a lump in my testes. He said, it's gone. He said, I had thick white fungus toenails. He said, they're growing through clear. So all these other things were clearing up. He was very excited. His wife was very excited. About 6 months later, he was going very well. He is retired, but because he was a builder, he used to do little jobs, and often people would get him to do little jobs. And he was renovating an old church, and there was a beautiful wood panel all around the edge, and he used a very toxic enamel or stainer to do the whole church. It made him quite sick, but he didn't want to stop till he'd finished the job. He basically never recovered from that, and the tumours began to grow again. And unfortunately, the tumours grew very, very quickly, and they took him down very fast. I think he rang me up, but at this stage, the tumours were blocking his colon, and I think he only lived about another month. So it was very, very sad. It's also an illustration that if someone has been challenged by a serious illness, they need to have their eye constantly on that one. It's like Elizabeth Cott. She knows if she wants to live, she has to live this life. And it's not a hard life to live. It's actually a wonderful life to live because the benefits are so amazing. I have another story too about a lady that came to our program, and she was Filipino, and she loved fish and she loved rice, and she lived on fish and rice. She came and did our program. She was married to an Australian man. The Australian man was about late 60s and she was 50. And I remember when I was lecturing, she could not sit still. She was in so much discomfort with these tumours in her lower abdomen. She would be moving the whole time. When we wrapped her in the sodium bicarbonate wraps, she just loved it because this moist heat penetrates deep into the body. She went home and she rang me up after she finished the program. She rang me up, it must have been a month later. She said, Barbara, if the tumours were coming away, how would they come away? I said, well, sometimes you pass them in your daily evacuation. She said, aha. She said, when I do my daily evacuation, she said, this black red liquid is coming out of me. She said, it's the exact same liquid that the nurses used to get out when they put a needle in to pull the fluid out of the tumours. So she was very excited. She went back, I think it was 5 months later, and she was totally tumour free. She had totally healed. They were all gone. She was very, very excited. I didn't hear anything again. 1 year later, she rang me. She said, Barbara, the tumours have come back. I said, oh, what have you been doing? She said, yes, I know. I'm eating my rice and my fish again and my coffee. But she said, if I come to Misty, you'll heal me. I said, wait just a minute. I said, what's happening with the tumours? She said, well, the doctor says it's blocking my colon and I can't go to the toilet. I said, well, I don't want you to come unless we've got something coming through. Because I said, the fact is you don't live long if something's not coming through. A day later, she appeared on the doorstep. Ooh. She was very thin. She was very, very weak. And unfortunately, we could not do much for her because she was in so much pain and she was so thin. And I talked to her and her husband about it. We could not do the wraps because she could not lie still. She could hardly take anything into her mouth. And that's when I realized nothing was coming through. One afternoon I was in her room and she was laying there. I was talking to her and she felt to vomit and bowel fluid came out. And I took it and I stroked her and she was looking at me so fearsome and I said, Lydia, let Jesus take you home. Let him take you home. She nodded, she closed her eyes and she died in front of me there. And I saw her at peace. Her husband came in the room and I looked at him and I said, she's gone. He shook his head. He said, she wanted to die at Misty. She wanted to die at Misty. So we rang up the local doctor and we said, unfortunately, one of our guests have died. He said, don't do anything, it's the weekend, it'll be too expensive. Just dress her down and leave her there till the Monday. He said, I can do nothing because I've never assessed her. And so we said to the husband, we'll make you another room. Michael and I dressed her down and made her look presentable. And then on the Monday, we took the advice from the local doctor and we said to the husband, we'll help you get her into your car and then drive her straight to the doctor that last assessed her. He'll do the death certificate and then drive her straight to the morgue and you will save a fortune because in Australia they make a lot of money out of that. Oh, and the husband was happy to do that. So we put her in the car and laid her down on the seat and he certainly did that. And he asked Michael if Michael, my husband, would be the pallbearer at the funeral. So he was very happy with that. But it is a sad story, and there are two stories to show that, you know, we don't live in a Garden of Eden here. We live on a planet where there is much disease. And so we must do much to make sure that our body doesn't get sick. And if we've had a serious illness, we need to have our eye on that. Now, there is a book called, can't remember what the name is. It's The Cancer Cure, I think it's called, by Royald Raymond Rife. Now, you never forget that name, Royald Raymond Rife. Now, Royald Raymond Rife, he was a scientist in the 20s, and he developed this huge microscope, and he could see in the microscope cancer cells, and if he put a certain frequency into those cancer cells, they would die. Now, he tried to sell this to the pharmaceutical companies who were interested, but he wanted a clause put in there that poor people could have the treatment for free. So they totally refused, and then they did something terrible. They destroyed his microscope so that it couldn't be. So I have his book, and his story is briefly quoted in my book. Now, in the 80s, two doctors in Perth, in Australia, they developed this frequency equipment. And Current Affairs is a television show that looks at current affairs. They actually did a show on these doctors. And so a lot of people became aware that you could go to Perth and have this frequency treatment. So we had 2 guests come to our program who had had the frequency treatment. It cost $10,000 and you're there for a week, but you have to stay in a motel down the road and just come and have the frequency treatment. They put these frequencies in, but they don't talk about lifestyle, they don't talk about diet. And so both these ladies that came to our retreat at different times, they'd have the treatment, they had been healed. But both of them, the cancer had come again because the cause is never addressed and the lifestyle is never changed. You see, there's no wonder cure. If there is a wonder cure, do you know what its name is? Human body. So one lady that came, she was so excited to hear about natural ways of healing, giving the body the right conditions. And it is now 10 years later and this lady is still cancer-free. She was able to conquer it through natural means. The other lady that came to our retreat, she was only, I think, 33. And by the time she came to us, her hip had cancer in it, she was limping, it was actually quite advanced. She implemented the program, but I think that it was already so far along the track, and unfortunately she passed. When someone comes to our retreat that has cancer, I say, I have seen 3 outcomes. One outcome is I've seen people turn around, and I've given you a few stories of how we've seen people turn around. I've also seen 3 months go to 6 years, and that's exciting. And I've also seen the last days made more comfortable. So whatever the outcome, it's always a plus. And I've had a couple in advanced stage come to our retreat, and I have given them the program, and they have passed maybe a few months later, and their spouse has always rung us back and said, thank you so much, because my loved one died with dignity, because the last days were made more comfortable. But I'm going to give you another story, and this is quite a remarkable story. It's the story of Emily. Emily was Filipino. Emily was in her late 40s, and she had brain cancer. She went to the doctor who put her on chemotherapy. It killed the cancer in the brain, and the doctor told her she was all clear. But 6 months later, she got breast cancer. Is it working? If it keeps coming back in other forms, it's not working. So she had 1 breast removed and she had chemotherapy, and the doctor said, you're all clear. She went home. 1 year later, she had liver and bone cancer. See, the problem with chemotherapy is it kills cancer, but it also kills the very process that your body uses to basically heal you. So when she came to us, she had bone and liver cancer, and she was just 50. She said, I started to have chemotherapy because she knew nothing else, but she lost all feeling in her extremities, all her fingernails went black, and she got lockjaw, and she could no more perspire. And so the doctor said, we'll stop the chemo and we'll try again in another month. And in that time, she heard about Misty Mountain Health Retreat. Her friends got together, her family, her church family, and they put together so that she could come to us for 2 weeks. She was a very, very quiet lady. She didn't say very much. And I told her what we could do, and she said to me, God has brought me here, and anything you say, I will do. And she was right. When she went on the morning walk, she was way behind everyone else. She just walked very, very slowly. The second wrap that we did on her, her lockjaw released. The second wrap, she began to perspire. She hadn't been able to perspire since she'd been on the chemotherapy. Little by little, we saw this lady turn around. In the second week, she was ahead of everyone on the morning walk. I was massaging her abdomen with my fist, as I do, going very deep, as she was having a colonic irrigation treatment. She looked at me as I was doing it and she said, I wouldn't have let you touch there with your little finger a week ago. I said, what were your pain levels when you came? She said 8 to 9 out of 10. She hadn't said a word. She just suffered totally in silence. But now she was excited, very excited. I made a program for her up and she went home. Now we have a man who works for us named Jeff. Now Jeff's our maintenance man. He's been a miner, he's been a bushy, big, tough, strong guy. And sometimes we get him to drive our guests out. And he shines up his shoes and puts his best check shirt and jeans on and takes our guests out because it's 1.5 hours to the airport. And he drove out with Emily. And Emily was no longer silent. Emily was excited. So she was telling Jeff everything. She said, I'm not in any pain anymore and I can walk anymore and blah, 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 blah. So he dropped her off, he came back, he came into my kitchen, sat down and said, I can't believe what I've just heard. He said, I'm out there fixing the fences. He said, I had no idea what you're doing in here. And he looked at me and he said, I want to work for you people for the rest of my life. Amazing story. I'll stop for a moment and tell you Jeff's story. Jeff came to us about 5 years before to do our fencing because we lived on a big property. And he came to us one day and he said, I know you people are Christian, but he said, I just want you to want to tell you I'm not interested and I don't want anyone to talk to me about it. I'm just here to do your fencing, right? We said, right, Jeff. Now we have a steam bath, and the steam bath is a wood-fired steam bath down by the creek. And Howard, our exercise coordinator, who also does the steam bath, he was away for 2 days. So we asked Jeff if he would man the steam bath because they've got to keep that steam bath going for a couple of hours because the ladies go first, then the men go. And Howard has a book there that he reads. It's called The Desire of Ages. It's a beautiful book. It's a book on the life of Jesus. Now this book, the cows had a nibble out of it and it got in the rain. It wasn't a very happy looking book. But Jeff's got nothing to do and he's an avid reader, so he picked up the book and he read it and he read it and he read it. And he read it in 3 days. Now it's a big book. And he came into the office and Michael looked up and he said, what is it, Jeff? He said, I'm sorry, but there was a book down there and I read it. And he said, and I just want to tell you, it's changed my life. He said, I want to be a Christian. And then Michael gave him the book, The Great Controversy. And The Great Controversy is a remarkable book. It starts at the death of Jesus, and this author links prophecy and history all together. And he read that in a week. Oh, that's heavy going. And he came back and he went into the office and he said, oh, my mind's been blown away by this book. He said, it's the first thing in my life I've read that's made sense. He said, I want to be baptised. So that was Jeff. And Jeff still works for us today. So that's Jeff's story. Let's go back to Emily. So Emily, he drove Emily home. Emily rang me 3 months later. She said, exciting news, Barbara, there's no more cancer in my liver. You see, liver and bone cancer are usually quite terminal because once the liver goes down, it's very, very hard for cancer to be controlled in the body. And in the bones, it's quite serious. So notice her progression in the brain, then in the breast, and because Emily was never taught how to give the body the right conditions for healing, even though the chemotherapy killed the cancer, it just came straight back. In fact, after someone's had chemotherapy, their body's ripe for cancer growth. So Emily would ring up everyone and tell everyone about Misty Mountain. Emily went back to the city, and it's hard to eat well in the city. Emily was a single mother with 2 teenage children and had a lot of stress. Emily was told when she came to us that she had 1 month to live. Emily lived another 6 years. I think possibly if Emily hadn't been pre-poisoned by the chemo, and if Emily had been able to live in the country with a fairly stress-free life, Emily might still be with us. But Emily was a very happy lady to actually have that extra little bit of lease on life. Remember what she said when she first came in? She said, anything you say, I will do. We had another lady, exactly the same age as Emily, exactly the same condition, bone and liver cancer. She had had no previous treatments. It had only been diagnosed, I think, 2 weeks before she came to us. She sat in front of me, and as I'm asking her different questions, she began to cry. I said, why are you crying? She said, I don't want to be here. I said, oh, no one's ever told me that. I've had many people say they've been wanting to come to the retreat for many years. So my next question was an obvious question. So why are you here, lady? Oh, my mother and my sister, they insisted I come. I said, but you know you have bone and liver cancer. Well, I don't feel like I have. She said, I just want to live my life. Ah, I said, would you like me to drive you home? Because what is the point? You see, a man convinced against his will be of the same opinion still. She said, oh no, I'll stay. We'd say, right, we're about to do a wrap. Would you like? Oh, I suppose. Here's a green drink. Oh, all right. She'd have a mouthful and just leave it. Her heart was not in it. Now, it's the only person that's ever been to our health retreat who hasn't had a turn around when they hear the information. But she had her heart set, and I think she had her heart set against it because of her mother and her sister. She was angry and bitter at them for making her come, so she had made a decision this was not going to work. It was very sad. We dropped her home, and unbeknownst to us, she took Michael's computer case and he had hers. And we were in the town for a couple of hours, and Michael suddenly discovered wrong computer. So he rang her up and we went to her little unit to swap it over. And when we got close, we could smell the meat cooking. She lived another month. And look at Emily. Emily lived another 6 years, even though she'd been previously poisoned by the chemotherapy. Remarkable stories. And now I must tell you the story of Doug. Doug came for 2 weeks. Doug's 40. Doug has prostate cancer. I'm asking him questions. I said, did you have a happy, healthy childhood? He said, no, my father yelled at me all my life. All my life he just yelled at me. Oh. So we move on to other questions. I could see this was very irritating to him. All week, whenever you saw Doug, he'd be frowning. Be frowning and looking around. And he'd tell people, my father yelled at me all my life, all my life. Do you know that the more you say it, guess what? The bigger it gets in your mind. It's a law of the mind. So he was with us for 2 weeks, so when midweek I consulted with him, and he'd heard my lecture on forgiveness, I said to him, Doug, have you forgiven your father? You don't understand, he yelled at me all my life, he just yelled. I said, I can appreciate that must have been very difficult, Doug, but you got to forgive him. You got to let this thing go. You don't understand. He was getting a little bit angrier, but I knew that I had to push this a bit. And I said, Doug, it'll only take a minute. You don't understand him. So I changed the subject. Whew. 3 minutes later, he said, I've done it. I've done it. I said, congratulations, Doug. That's a mighty decision. A very good illustration to show you don't have to feel like it. He knew he had to do it, and he did it. What is it? Fake it till you make it. Do you know, the next day when I saw Doug, he was smiling. Do you know he smiled all week? Do you know that he didn't tell anyone else the story anymore? Do you remember what I told you this morning? That when we forgive, it activates those little glial cells in the brain that start to mop up all of those thorns. And that's what was happening in Doug. You see, when you forgive, you turn painful past to dust. There's no rotting, smelling wound down there to call your attention to it. You've forgiven. Do you know, I believe it was at that point Doug began to heal. So there are many different causes for serious illness. And sometimes it can be the mind. And sometimes, as in Emily's case, it was purely what was happening in her body. Mind you, there was a bit of stress because of going back to some challenging teenagers. So it's multifactorial, and that's why I say, you are the doctor. Tick the boxes and see what could possibly be contributing to this thing. We had one lady do our program and she had inflammatory breast cancer. And as I'm lecturing and as I'm showing the dangers of mould in the house, she went, oh dear. And the other guest said, what's the matter? She said, in my house, my roof is black. She said, I clean it every now and then, but the black comes back. And she said, and I know what the problem is. Up in my roof, there's all this dust that's come from the sawmill. It's like wood dust. And my roof leaks a little bit. So what happens when wood dust gets damp? It goes mouldy. And she said, my husband and I are separated, but this is his house. He's letting me live in it rent-free. And it was a bit cold, so he came and put insulation bats in the roof on top of the mouldy. And the other guest looked at her and said, you've got to get out of that house. She said, but it's cheap rent. She won't be paying any rent soon. So can you see that she had to address that one? We had another lady with inflammatory breast cancer, and she had found out that her 17-year-old daughter had been pack raped, and within a month the cancer had developed. So can you see there's another angle that is coming in there? I had another lady with breast cancer. She was only 33, very beautiful woman. She was a doctor of chiropractic. She was from Quebec. She came with her husband, and her breast was very large and hard. And I said to her husband, how did it get to this? He said she wouldn't do anything, she wouldn't do anything. And now we are here. And then I found out she used to do body sculpturing. Now when a woman body sculptures, she works out intensively. And when a woman works out really intensively, her periods stop. You find most professional athlete women, their periods stop. Now when she's not ovulating, she's not making corpus luteum, so her progesterone levels start dropping. And something else was happening. Apparently 3 days before they show, you know, stand up and make their muscles come out, they drink no water. Because if they get dehydrated, all the muscles stand out and it looks really good, apparently. So can you see the threads that came in for this lady's case? In fact, a friend of hers did the program a month later, and she said, let me show you, and she brought it up on the web, the pictures of her doing body sculpturing. And you know, they have G-strings on and tiny little things, and they stand there in the poses.
Very real quick, I'm going to check with Elder Thomas. I know it's 2 minutes before the top of the hour. Elder Thomas, we have approximately about 12 minutes left. Is it all right to go past 12 minutes just to share this?
Yo, let me tell you something. Just from her talking about eating seeds is the concentrated nutrients and vitamins that you find in the plant is worth another 12 minutes, man.
Okay.
So the seed is what we normally spit out.
Right.
And that's the thing that she said is compacted nutrients, man.
Yeah.
Play the other 12, man.
Okay, bro.
I'm listening. Nobody else is. I'm listening.
Okay.
And this was only November, and she came to us in July. So I'm looking at it, and I said, well, the breasts look normal, because it was okay back then. And she said, yes, it developed very, very quickly. She was flying a lot. She sort of wouldn't really do anything about it. And that lady wrote a book on acid-alkaline balance, a whole book. I've got her book. They gave me a book. They signed it. All I could really do was go to the local doctor and make sure she had all her painkillers. She was living on painkillers. She was in so much pain. We couldn't do wraps. We couldn't do anything. And at night, she'd just walk round and round the veranda. She was running out of her painkillers, so we went to the local doctor. And he knows what we do. He's very supportive, and he just gave them to me. I said, this lady's, and at that stage, all we could really do. Unfortunately, she only lasted 1 more month. Very, very sad story. So, wonderful stories of healing, wonderful stories of the body's incredible ability to heal itself, but also a couple of sad stories of people who maybe left it too late or people who didn't continue. In fact, it has often been said that you can't fight cancer twice. If you're not careful, it can take you down the second time. It is not something to fear, because if you give the body the right conditions, you can prevent it, and if you give the body the right conditions, you can heal from it. And that's why I say, you're the doctor, every single person is the doctor, because only they know what helps and what doesn't help. But we had a lady come to us who was going 10 times a day to the toilet. She was in her 70s. Her daughter was a naturopath and had put her on raw food. Now, when you've got an irritated colon, raw food, it scrapes the colon. And this lady was so thin. So I immediately put her on slippery elm 4 times a day. 8, 12, about 5, and then just before bed at night. And I gave her protein drinks to supplement. Within 24 hours, she was no more bleeding, no more cramping. Everything had come back down to normal. When we started eating food, the bowel movements slowed right down to only about 3 a day. So when she went home, she was a very happy lady. She had more energy, she had no more pain, the bowel movements were all behaving. So she went home very happy. I said, you must be on raw food. Once that's healed, of course you can have some raw food. I'm a raw food lover. I like to aim for about 50 cooked and 50 raw. So excited to see some raw salads at lunch there today. But can you see, you've got to change that depending on what's happening in the body. She was going very well, and then she rang me up about 6 weeks later. She said, Barbara, I'm going 10 times a day to the toilet. I said, oh. So the detective hat goes on. What have you done? Well, she said, I went out with my other girlfriend ladies, and I only had half a slice of banana cake. Banana cake. What's banana cake got in it? Wheat, dairy, and sugar. The 3 things that act like kerosene to a fire on a compromised gut. I said, surely you can't do that. She said, well, the other ladies are eating it. I said, yeah, but they haven't got what you've got. She said, what'll I do? My daughter said to go on the raw food. No raw food. I said, just have some nice thick vegetable soups, very soothing to the gut. See, cooking the food softens the fibre. And go back to the slippery elm 4 times a day. What's the saying? Go back to where you last saw light. I said, the day may come, Shirley, when you might be able to have a little bit of banana cake, but not now. Not now, not until you're healed. It's like Elizabeth Cott. It's 5 years later, the lady that's conquered her cancer, and she eats just like I do now. You see, it's not forever. When a person is not well, they need to make some certain changes to bring about the healing response. And then as their body heals, they need not take the slippery elm 4 times a day. As her colon gets back to working well, she might only take it once a day, and then eventually may not even take the slippery elm. So the herbs are just there. So my last story is about a man named Henry, and Henry is 64. Henry was on blood pressure medication, blood thinning, blood cholesterol, blood sugar, gout medication, and stomach ulcer medication, and he was 64. Sorry, no, he's 66 because he just retired as a judge. He was also carrying a little bit of extra weight. I said, "Are you interested in coming off your medication, Henry?" He said, "No, thank you very much. I'm very happy with my medication." I always respect everyone's choice. But I put him on the hawthorn berry. Now, the hawthorn berry is a herb that strengthens the heart. So we made up a tea and he drank a litre of that in the day. I put him on magnesium, which relaxes the heart at rest. By the end of the week, I made a program for him to continue. He said, "Thank you very much," and he left. 4 months later, he rang me. He said, "Barbara, I'm wondering if I can come and visit you and get some more hawthorn berries. I want to help my friends get off their meds." I said, "Come for lunch, Henry." Now, when I opened the door, I didn't recognise Henry. He'd lost 20 kilos. 20 kilos in 4 months. I said, "Looking good, Henry?" He said, "Yes, I can do my coat up now." All the puffiness had gone out of his face. He said, "Sit down, I have some stories for you." He said, "I went to the doctor last week and the doctor was taking my blood pressure, and he got up and he went to walk out of the room, and Henry said, 'Why are you walking out?' And the doctor said, 'The machine's broken.'" And Henry said, "Why do you say that?" And the doctor said, "Well, that machine says that your blood pressure's 120 on 80. He said, "And your blood pressure's not that. Your blood pressure is 165 on 100. That's on medication, by the way." Henry said, that's my blood pressure now." Doctor raised his eyebrows. Do you know the doctor took him off all medication because his blood thinning's normal, his blood cholesterol's normal, his blood sugars are normal, blood pressure's normal, everything's normal, and he has no more gout and he has no more stomach ulcer. Isn't that what everyone should do? Is prove to their doctor that they can do it. Because the doctor doesn't know about hawthorn berry or cayenne pepper or so. Now, if the doctor had kept him on his meds, do you know what would have happened? The blood sugar would have gone too low, he would have started passing out. The blood pressure would have gone too low and he would have started passing out. The blood thinning would have gone too thin and he would have started bleeding to death. You see, the drugs just come in and say, "Get out of my way, I've got a job to do whether you need it or not." Whereas herbs work with the needs of the body. He said, the doctor said, "I don't have to have my total knee replacement anymore. Because the weight has gone, he hasn't got all this weight on the knees." Poor knees aren't designed for big weight. What a remarkable story. I said, "Henry, tell me what you're eating." He said, "Well, I have a spaghetti bowl every morning with chopped fruit and whole grain cereal, maybe millet or quinoa or rice and some coconut cream." Did you hear that? 20 kilos lost on coconut cream. And I sprinkle linseed on top, and then I have a slice of sourdough spelt toast with avocado and tomato. And he said, "And I don't eat again till lunchtime." You don't need to with that breakfast. He said, "At lunch I have a big salad, I have some vegetables baked or steamed or stir-fried, and then I have some sort of protein, lentils or chickpeas or something like that, and then I might have another slice of sourdough toast with avocado and tomato." And he said, "And I do not eat again till breakfast." Very decisive man. Now that's not a light diet. But can you see when he's eating it? He's eating it at the beginning of the day, breakfast and lunch. He's retired so he can have his main meal at lunch. Not everyone can eat a nice big main meal at lunch. So what a lot of people do is they'll eat an earlier evening meal and take a packed lunch that's a little bit heartier. So, you play with it. I said, "That's impressive, Henry. Tell me about your exercise program," because he couldn't have that sort of weight loss and look like he did without exercise. He said, "I find I can walk another block every week." Interesting. As he loses weight, as his muscles get stronger, as his lungs get more able to expand and get more oxygen in, he can go further for less effort, for less amount of time. It's an impressive story. Remember, he wasn't interested in stopping medication, and who took him off his meds? The doctor did. Now, some people decide to just stop. Some people decide to ease it off. It basically is what you're comfortable with. But once you start giving the body the right conditions, it can turn around. I had a letter from Henry a year later, 38 kilos lost. Are there any questions before we close? In a hawthorn berry, you can buy them as a powder, you can buy them as a capsule, you can buy them as a tablet, or you can buy them as a berry. So we buy them as a dried berry, but we also have tablets because not everyone wants to make up herb tea. And if people are travelling, the tablets are better. It's a very safe herb, and as my story shows, you can use it in conjunction with medication. Yeah? Pardon? You know, it's a good idea for everyone to have a herb book in their home. And if you read every herb, you'll get bamboozled. So what you do is you just start using the herbs to help you or to help your family. And as you have experience with them, then you'll start to develop your knowledge. And that's what I did. Because you read a herb book and everything seems to be a cure-all. So you just start with what you can use for you.
Amen. I pray that everyone was blessed today. This is part one of Sister Barbara O'Neill, and whenever another moment arises, we'll play part two. But I encourage everyone. I mean, I'm going to turn this over to Elder Thomas, especially for those who are on the call. And if I may, Elder Thomas, this coming Monday, I will play something very special. I talked about the 13-letter word that is so important. For those who don't know, on Mondays, we have something called Man Up Monday, and we've been focusing on marriage and relationships. Well, Elder Thomas, I learned something else about this 14-letter word that not only affects marriages and relationships, whether parent to child, best friend to best friend, church member to leadership of the church, business partners, or just basically friends. I have learned that what also is affecting our health and causing diseases is these 13-letter word. And this awesome preacher, Pastor Henry Wright, breaks it down why we can't handle this word. It's called unforgiveness. I encourage you, my brother, my sister, be on the call Monday morning at 6 a.m. Bring your pad, invite 20 people to be on the call. It has changed my life because I realized I thought, Elder Thomas, that I was pretty good and I have forgiven. I have not. And because of that, it has affected my diabetes. I turn it back over to you, Elder Thomas.
Thank you so much, brother. Listen, I am so excited. You know, if you have cancer, you know, I think somebody put a comment in the YouTube, if you have cancer, you know, she was talking about drinking green juices. But in those green juices, there's no sugar and there's no fruit mixed in some of the green juices. So you can get all of the nutrients and vitamins you need without feeding the cancer. Fruits, many times the sugar that's in it is not the same as the sugar that you sort of scoop out of a jar, because a lot of the fruits have the fibers with it that pulls out some of the bad parts of the sugar. So it's definitely a balance. It's definitely a balance, but I would recommend you guys get her book. I'm an avid reader, and definitely also watch the rest of her video series, because she talks about if you have a particular condition, this situation may work, but if you don't have a particular condition, this may work better for you. So her name is Barbara O'Neill. She has an awesome series on the internet. I think it's like 14 parts long. Between her and Dr. CB, I really love the information that they share. And I think her information in some regards is more practical than some of the information that's provided by Dr. Sebi. But nevertheless, thank you, Brother Paul, for sharing the series with us today.
Absolutely.
Father, be with everyone on this line today. Be with their health, be with their finances, be with their family. But most of all, Father, we ask you for salvation. Father, keep us and help us to transform. Help us to have the willingness to sacrifice our lust and our desires for food and other things that will cause us to destroy our own selves. We ask these and so many more blessings in your holy son, Yeshua's name. Amen, amen, and amen again.
Amen.
Until I meet you and greet you.
And Elder Tom, I'm sorry, I cut you, brother. And one more thing, I forgot, I should have mentioned earlier. There's a book that she mentioned with the young man who was the fence repairing. He read a book, even though the birds got to it and all that. It was called the book, The Desire of Ages. A wonderful author. Her name is Ellen White. My favorite chapter in that book is Gethsemane. Gethsemane. I would encourage you, my brother, my sister. I read it as a child, and it's still one of my favorite chapters in that entire book. If you ever want to just be blessed, if you just want to, and give it to a young person. If you want to give a gift, a book, it's called The Desire of Ages. God bless you. Turn it back over to the other times.
All right, good deal. I just want to give one final note. A lot of times if you drink smoothies, people put fruits and vegetables in these green smoothies. They'll put like kale and they'll put green apples. Don't mix fruits and vegetables. That will upset your stomach. Fruits digest faster than vegetables. Fruits digest faster. So if you're going to eat fruits, eat it first. If you're going to have a fruit smoothie, have a fruit smoothie. If you're going to have a vegetable smoothie, have a vegetable smoothie. Don't mix fruits and vegetables. It could cause you some stomach problems. Anyway, we'll leave that for another day. Just wanted to share that tip with you. Until next time, everybody, until I meet you and greet you, walk with the King today and be a blessing. Today's Health Nugget or Wellness Wednesday is official.